Okay, if we want to make a start, Catherine, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Fantastic. Over to
So,
you then,
hello.
Catherine.
I can hear people still joining, but I think we'll start anyway because it is 11 o'clock. So, hi everyone. Good morning. What a great thing to be talking about on a Monday. I'm Catherine Brooks. I'm the Strategic Highways Director for McCann's, and really interested to be hosting along with Kate the Listen and Learn today. So I'm not going to say an awful lot because the guys have got a lot to talk about and they'll be far more interesting than I ever could be. So I just wanted to say thank you to Danny and Phil for sharing their stories with us, which they soon will do. Um, I think anybody that's in this industry and has been in this industry for a while knows the importance of mental health. We hear the statistics about mental health within the construction industry, where lots of men are living away from home, living in caravans, having lots of pressure in their jobs, feeling the bravado of working on site potentially, and not necessarily feeling they can open up. And I think many of us can relate to that. For those of you that can't, then good, yeah, I'm happy for you. But it's a big thing. And of course, with it being International Men's Day tomorrow, it's very poignant that we should be discussing this. I'm hoping that we're going to have great presentation from the guys. And then there's a bit of a Q&A. So, please feel free to ask any questions, either verbally later on in the meeting or just stick them in the chat. We've got a lot of people on the line. I think we were expecting up to about 70. We've got 65 at the moment. So without further ado, I'll hand over to the guys and let you take us through your presentation.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Danny.
Morning.
Good morning.
I'll be looking forward to this.
See that, Dan?
I can, mate, yeah.
Yep.
Sound. Right, good morning, everyone.
Good
What
morning.
you're going to receive this morning is a
Morning.
mental health workshop delivered by myself and Danny. This session has been delivered to all the professional rugby league players in the country. It's been delivered to 5 Premiership Rugby Union clubs, been delivered to 5 Premier League football clubs. But more and more now, we tend to go into the workforce. We tend to go into a lot of construction sites, a lot of construction companies and nuclear power plants. I know there's ladies on the talk, but we generally go into a lot of alpha male type businesses where men, in particular, don't really want to talk about how they're feeling or speak about their mental health, which both myself and Danny thinks a load of rubbish, to be fair. Who are we? My name's Phil Levers. I'm an ex-professional rugby league player. I played in over 500 games at the top level, both in Australia and over here in the UK. Now, as a player, I used to go through a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress. But then again, in life, we're all entitled to have anxiety and we're all entitled to have stress. Sometimes it challenges us. Sometimes it sets a bar for ourselves where we can set ourselves some goals to overcome that anxiety and that stress. The problem lies, though, is when that anxiety and stress lingers on for days and weeks on end, and that's when we need to do something about it. But me as a player, I could handle all that. I then went into coaching where I coached at the top level in over 300 games. But it was during my coaching career that I had a bit of a roller coaster ride with my mental health. And I'll tell you a bit more about that a little later.
But guys, what
Go on,
Phil
Dave.
doesn't tell you is he's probably the bravest rugby player that there has ever been. Phil actually played at Wembley 3 times for St Helens in Challenge Cup finals in front of 96, 92 and 88,000 people.
Good to see you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye. With a mullet and an handlebar moustache. Now, how brave is that? Come on, what a man.
So introduce yourself, Daniel.
So, okay, I'm Danny Sculthorpe, ex-professional rugby league player, played just short of 300 games at the highest level. Unfortunately for me, though, at the age of 30, an age where I should be hitting my peak and playing at my best, I got forced into retirement through a serious injury. Suffered from depression and got into mental health working, and I've been doing this for the last 14 years. Unfortunately for me, though, the last 8 weeks, I've had to have brain surgery twice. I've had a problem which Phil will tell you about, and it's been probably the hardest 8 weeks of my life. Phil?
Spot on, lad. Spot on. The thing with Dan is that obviously he had that surgery to have a tumour removed. And what it has done, it's affected his memory, well, for the short term anyway. While there's a swelling in his skull, it affects his memory. So you'll be hearing his story through my my dulcet tones. So what our aim is for today is to look at the signs and symptoms of mental health. A healthy mind and a healthy body go hand in hand. The impact of drink and drugs, as they are commonly used to as a go-to when men in particular are struggling with their mental health, and whether you would help a mate. If you saw one of your friends, your work colleagues, or even a family member, and you thought that they were struggling with their mental health, would you have the courage to call them out on it? Would you tell them that you'd noticed a difference in them and tell them what you'd seen? Or would you call yourself out if you thought you were struggling with your mental health? Because what we know is when we talk about mental health, it's a bit of that taboo subject. Because what we normally get, a lot of people get distracted. When we go out onto the park and we get the boys coming off the park into the welfare rooms, they generally come in, and both myself and Dan can tell that they don't want to be there because they don't want to give us eye contact. And they're looking at the floor, they're just thinking to themselves, what am I doing in here? When the reality is that every single person on this call and every single person in the world has mental health. We all have mental health. We all have physical health. But luckily, we all don't have mental illness. So what Dan's going to do now, he's going to read you some signs and symptoms of people who may be struggling with low mood, anxiety, stress, even depression. And I want you to have a look at these and see if you noticed any of these things within yourself.
Okay. So in the last few months, have you been feeling nervous, anxious, or on edge? Not being able to stop or control your worrying? Worrying too much about loads and loads of different things? Do you have trouble relaxing after a long day at work? Can you go home, switch off, chill out and relax? Or are you restless, so it's hard to sit still? I don't suppose anyone in this company will become easily annoyed or irritable, will they? I bet. Or feeling afraid as if something really bad or awful might happen. Now, you might be looking at that list. You might be ticking 2, 1, 3 of them things off in you, which is okay. 3 happening at the same time is no big deal. There is no doubt throughout our life, 100%, we will all go through all of them at different points. The problem is, though, if all of them happening at the same time, they're happening day after day, week after week, month after month, that's when there's a problem there. And that's when we need to do something about it.
I'd assume that everyone on this call has had a bath before in your lifetime.
I hope so,
when
Phil.
you finish a long day at work. Hey?
I hope so.
I do too, mate. I do. So when you finish a long day at work, you go home, you run yourself a deep bath, and then you plunge yourself into it, and you get a really relaxing feeling. What actually happens to your body there is that your heart rate slows down and your blood pressure, it lowers. Now, you can replicate that same feeling through a thing called controlled breathing techniques. And it sounds pretty simple because it's just about breathing, but it's with a bit of a difference. This is in through your nose for 4 seconds. You hold it at the back for 5, and then you exhale for 6. Now, you'll start to do them, and you probably get to about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6. And there's nothing more you want to do is to stop. And that's simply because you haven't practiced it enough. But if you can practice it and get yourself up around 18, 19, when you're going through a bit of anxiety and a bit of stress, you get into that technique, you'll have the same impact as a bath, where it'll just slow down your heart rate and lower your blood pressure. Now, I used to use it a lot when I was coaching. I used to have a lot of players coming into my changing room, loaded full of anxiety, to the point where they'd end up being physically sick. So they'll use a lot of nervous energy up. So I got them into the breathing techniques. Took them about 5 weeks to master it. But after the 5th week, when they walked into that changing room and they got that anxiety surge, they just got into the breathing techniques and it brought everything under control. But Dan, you used to use it to sleep too, didn't you, after all your opiates?
Yeah, I was on, when I first got injured in 2002, and I had to have a massive back operation at Wigan. I suffered really bad from pain, and I got introduced to two massive, strong opiate drugs that really helped me with the pain, but they got me obsessed with them. I couldn't stop taking them for about 9 months, and it had a massive problem. But I got introduced, and I think it was the only thing that could have helped me. I got introduced to the deep breathing techniques, and when I mastered it, it massively helped with my sleep, and I could get on and sleep at night without the painkillers that I was taking. But we also use it in schools and colleges, universities. So if any of you guys have got kids who are going in for big exams soon, in college or at school, you introduce them to the deep breathing techniques when they're struggling with nerves and that, you get them to do that, and it'll have a massive help on them. It really will.
Spot on, lad. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to interview Danny about his mood over the last 5 or 6 weeks. I want you to listen to his answers, and then I just want your feelers to unmute and shout out whether you think he's suffering from none, low, moderate, or severe depression. So have you had little interest or pleasure in doing things like that?
Well, not really, mate. As you know, I used to love playing golf, and I've been doing it recently when I've been struggling. But every second shot that I'm taking at the minute seems to be coming out of the trees and the bushes. So I'm known as Bushy Sculthorpe on the course now. But there used to be another pleasure that I found really, really good. But with my wife at the minute, I'm not doing that.
All right. What about feeling down, depressed, or hopeless?
Well, I can't see a future, Phil. Been out of work now for 3 years, can't find a job. I'm getting it in the neck all the time off the wife to go down to the job centre. So about 8 weeks ago, I went down to Wigan Job Centre, just about to walk through the front doors, and I noticed that there was a lot of people staring at me and judging me. So I didn't bother going in. I just turned tail and scurried off home.
Right. What about your sleep pattern? You have trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, sleeping too much?
I go to bed at a decent time. It'll definitely be a decent time now, 9 o'clock for the Aussie programme, which just started the last night.
Celebrity. I'm a celebrity,
yeah. So I'll be going to bed at 9. Me and my wife, she'll be asleep within 3 minutes. So I'll end up watching that, putting YouTube on. I'll be awake till after midnight. So I end up watching that station you told me about.
Oh, yeah, Babe Station, yeah.
Yeah, Babe Station. So I'm watching that most of the night. So I'm going to sleep late, getting up late. So to be honest, you're pretty lucky that I'm here this morning.
What about feeling bad about yourself? Do you let people down?
I always let people down. People text me, I don't answer. People ring me, I don't answer again. I had 3 friends day before yesterday knock on the front door and he hid behind the curtain. So I'm a bit of a shithouse, if I'm honest.
Okay. What about trouble concentrating when people are talking to you and things like that?
Sorry, what'd you say? Sorry?
I'll say that is your best acting that you've done for a while. You're going all right with that one. What about your appetite, kid?
Well, I've just got a job in Coronation Street as Tyrone's brother, and I don't think I'm going to be seeing him with him being in Australia. Well, let's move on. Poor appetite or eating too much. As a player, professional player for 14 years, I used to eat really healthy. I used to love eating a lot of protein, a lot of chicken and fish. I used to eat a lot of vegetables and fruit and salad, drink a lot of water, keeping hydrated. But about 2 months ago, I fell off the bandwagon. I've started smashing KFC in every day, all the crap shops. Burger King, yeah. And a couple of weeks ago, I bumped into an old friend of mine, a guy called Longhaired Steve.
He's a big lad.
He's a big lad, yeah. But he's organised me into doing 3 things in a week. I've got to eat as many hamburger McDonald's as I can. So the last one I did was Monday. Was it Monday? Yeah, and I got. What did I get yesterday? I got about 22, but he's got 26. So I reckon if I can keep going 3 times a week, I reckon by Christmas I'll have him smashed.
Okay. What about feeling you'd be better off dead or want to hurt yourself in some way?
Well, I'm originally from a town called Oldham. Now I don't know if anybody on this on
They're
this
all hard as
session
nails
here
up
will have heard of Oldham, but yeah, it's a bit rough. I used to get a lot of shit down there, so I moved to Wigan in 2001, and I've lived there ever since. So I reckon, you know, I could take my own life at the minute the way things are going, but no, I'm not into it. No.
Okay, all right, doctors. What level are you putting him at? None, low, moderate, or severe depression? Just a couple of shout out.
Severe depression.
Severe. I'd say severe.
Okay, cool. Well,
Doctors.
you'd probably bang it. If he was to go to the doctor, they'd put him at really top end moderate to low end severe. So well done for that. But the reality for us is a lad that's on the screen here. This was Danny's best mate. He's also a lad that I used to coach. His name's Terry Newton, who was an out-and-out rugby league player from Wigan. He went on to play for Wigan. He represented his country 23 times, moved over the Pennines playing for Leeds, then Bradford, and then at the age of 30, he signed a 2-year deal to play for Wakefield. Now, he really ripped into his pre-season, got himself extremely fit, started the season well, but then he started to pick a couple of niggly little injuries up. Now, one thing about Terry on the field, he was an absolute animal. He was one of the toughest kids I've had the pleasure to coach. But off it, he was very, very easily led. And somebody suggested to him to take human growth hormone to help him get over his injuries quicker. So he took it, but he became the first person in the world in any sport to be tested positive for growth and got a 2-year drug ban. Now, I don't think he missed playing the game. He'd been playing the game since he was 5-year-old. The two things that I think he lost the most, he lost being in and around his mates, having the banter, having the crack. But the biggest thing that he lost was he lost his identity about who he was. One minute he was Terry Newton, the Super League player. Next minute he was just Tez, and he couldn't get his head around it. 3 months down the track, he's being interviewed on a show on Sky Sports called Super League Superman, and they were asking him about the highs and the lows of his career. But the answers that Terry were given was quite frightening. It was as if he was waving this red flag to say, hey, I've got some issues going on, I need some help. But because of the stigma that was in our sport 14 years ago, nobody recognised those signs and symptoms in Terry. And 3 months later, he hung himself in his family home. Absolutely devastated a lot of people in the sport and in and around. And a lot of different organisations were set up then. You know, there's a couple of charities that were set up off the back of that. And it was all put in place because it didn't think that there was anything out there for other players who might struggle like Terry. I always think back to what I know in mental health now. You know, back then, could I ask Terry the same questions that I just asked Danny? A, what would his answers have been? B, could have been signposted to seek some help? And C, could his two daughters still have a dad today? It's just a real shame that he saw it as a weakness to admit that he had a problem and go and get some help. When the reality is, if an individual can admit they've got a problem and go and seek some help, then they're a bigger, braver, stronger person than if they don't. But mental illness doesn't just affect women, men as well. It does affect women. You know, 78% of all diagnoses in a doctor's surgery with a mental health issue are women. But 75% of all suicides are men. And that's because we don't talk. Every single day in the UK, 18 people take their own life. It's 5 women and 13 men, which is a full rugby league team. When we talk about construction industry, you're 10 times more likely to die by suicide than you are from an accident. 2 construction workers take their own life every single day of the year. Here's the biggest stat. In the world, every year, 800,000 people die by suicide. That's a death by suicide every 40 seconds. So if you're watching a game of rugby and the whistle goes at 0, then it goes at 80. While you're watching that match, in that 80 minutes, 120 people have died by suicide, which are scary, scary stats and ones that need to change. Dan?
Very sad, mate. Very sad. Suicide is the biggest killer of men under 45. That's 3 times more than road traffic accidents. It's the leading cause of death in young people, and recently the stats regarding new mothers have risen. Middle-aged men middle-aged men are the highest at-risk group, but your support can and will save lives. So if any of you are on social media You see anyone struggling with their mental health, give them some help. You know, the likes of, oh God, my brain's gone.
Samaritans, Papyrus, or
Yeah.
even if you saw a positive mental health quote and you were to retweet it or follow it on, you might be okay, but one of your family members or friends might be struggling, and just from seeing that message that you've put out there, really, really could save a life.
I mean, it does save lives when you talk to people who are struggling. We've worked in mental health now for the last 14 years. We've spoke to over 900,000 people, and 800 people have now told us that we've saved their life, which is absolutely unbelievable, and the reason why I will work and Phil will work in mental health forever. Phil,
I'll give you an example. We'll give you an example there too. We went to a talk with Workington Cricket Club. A load of Cumbrians came up there to that. And when we spoke about that, what Dan just said about the 800 people, we finished the talk. At the end of the session, this woman walked over to me and Dan, tapped us both on the arm and said, "That's 801," and walked out. Ooh, goosebumps.
Amazing.
Right, so I'll give you an insight into Dan. So at the age of 15, Dan was selected to play for the England schoolboys, probably one of the highest honours you can get as a schoolboy, and went on a tour. When he came back off that tour, he signed a 3-year deal to play for Leeds Rhinos. But he had 5 games left with his amateur side, and his coach said to him, "Listen, Dan, I'm not going to pick you because I don't want you to get injured, and I don't want you to ruin that new contract that you signed up there." And Dan just said, "Listen," he said, "I want to play with all these kids. I'm not having that." He said, "It'll be my last chance to play with these that I've played with the last 8 years." So they came to an agreement where the coach said, "Right, I'll put you on the bench, and if we're struggling, I'll give you a run out." So they're playing Eccles over in Salford, the 5th last game of the season, and they'll lose them 14-10. They just scored, and Eccles were kicking off. So the coach said, "Go on, Dan, get on there and make a difference." So he lined up on the back fence, waited for the kickoff. The ball went straight to him. He looked up, he picked someone out in the line. He thought, "Right, you're having it." Ran 100 mile an hour into this tackle, got hit from the side, and he dislocated his kneecap. Well, he's on the floor. He's trying. The pain was unbelievable, but he was trying to knock it back in. It wouldn't go back in. The paramedics came. They tried to knock it back in. It wouldn't go back in still. So he ended up going to Salford Infirmary, where the doctors put him onto a bit of gas and air, pulled his leg, knocked it underneath, and the kneecap popped back into place, and all the pain disappeared. He probably should have been playing in about 8 weeks' time. But unfortunately for him, the shock and trauma of that dislocation stopped his pancreas from producing insulin, and he became a type 1 diabetic, where he'll have to inject insulin every day now, 3 or 4 times a day. When he went over to Leeds, where he's billeted out to a couple over there, he got obsessed with eating carbohydrates, all the pasta, the rice, the bread, potatoes. And he started to balloon. He started to put a lot of weight on. And it became a bit of a vicious circle, because more carbs that he had, the more insulin he was taking. As I said, he just couldn't get fit. And after about 8 months, Leeds decided to release him from his contract. He went over to Warrington, where he signed a 3-year deal over there. And in the space of 8 months, the same thing occurred. He couldn't get fit, and they released him. So he just thought to himself, "You know what? I'm going to have to go and get a proper job. There's no other diabetics in the game that I can get some advice off. I'm going to have to go out and get a job. That's the end of my career." So he went and got a job in an air conditioning factory, making the units and making all the ducting. And he was the labourer. He was doing all the heavy lifting. But the biggest thing that happened to him was that he moved back into his parents. So he was more comfortable at home with what he ate, with the insulin he was taking, and he started back doing some weights at his local, at his amateur gym at Waterhead, and he started to shed weight really, really quickly. It was about 3 months into this job, and he got a phone call off an old school teacher of his, who just said to him, "Listen, Dan, I've just took over as caretaker coach down at Rochdale. Why don't you come down and do a 3-month pre-season with us and see where that goes?" The first thing inside Dan's head was, "Oh my God, Rochdale Hornets, they're shit." He's like, "You know what? It's on my doorstep. I'll give it a go." So he went down, had a really strong pre-season, and eventually signed a 3-year deal to play for them. And over that 3-year period, he played 81 consecutive games, not missing one, and he got the Championship Player of the Year 2 years in a row. At the end of that contract, all his dreams came true, and he signed a deal to play for Wigan Warriors, probably one of the biggest clubs in the world. He got to play with some of the best players in the world. He got to represent his county. He got picked to play for Great Britain, went on a tour to South Africa, and whilst over there, he actually captained his country 2 times. When he came back from there, he was released. A new coach had just come in, didn't see eye to eye with him, and he sent him out on loan to Huddersfield. And he signed a contract at Cass, then at Wakefield. And at the age of 30, he signed a 4-year deal to play for Bradford Bulls. Still a big club in Super League at this time. And he just thought to himself, you know what? These are all my dreams come true. This a 4-year deal will probably take me to my retirement. It's the most money I've ever been on. But more than that, his wife was staying at home looking after his 2 kids, so he was the support for them. Life couldn't get any better. About 5 weeks into pre-season, he rocked up on a Monday morning, and they had a big conditioning session out on the field in the morning. So he went and did that, came in, had some lunch. In the afternoon, they're doing a heavyweight session in the gym. It was a power day. It was legs day. So he went round, did all the exercises, and came to his last exercise, which was the squat rack. Loaded the bar up full of weights, stepped back to do his squat, did his first one, felt great. Did his second one, felt strong. Did his third, and he prolapsed a disc in the bottom of his spine. Now, when you prolapse a disc, everyone thinks that the disc slips out of place, which isn't really true. What actually happens when you do that is that inside every disc in your spine, there's a soft toothpaste substance. When he did that squat, that squeezed out the joint, and it formed around the joint, and it was trapping his sciatic nerve. It had gone rock hard like bone within 72 hours, and he needed surgery. So he went and had surgery done, and all the pain had disappeared. He didn't have any back pain, but he had all these sciatic pains going down his leg, and all that pain had disappeared. And he just thought to himself, you know what, I've got 8 to 10 weeks here to get myself super fit for the start of the season. I'm going to really rip in. Unfortunately, 2 weeks down the track, he woke up one morning in the most excruciating pain, being sick everywhere, and he couldn't move in his bed. He rang his dad, and his dad said, you need to ring your specialist. He rang his specialist, and his specialist said, listen, Dan, I'm not happy with this. He said, because you're a type 1 diabetic, you're more susceptible to pick up an infection. You need to come and see me. So his dad came over from Oldham to Wigan, picked him up, took him into the doctor in Manchester. His dad wheeled him into the doctor's room, and he said to him, listen, Dan, he said, I don't like the look of you. He said, the sickness you've been going through, he said, but the colour of your skin. He said, I need to do an emergency MRI and blood test. He went and had them done, came back to the doctor's surgery, sat there for 4 hours while he waited for the results. When the results came in, he hadn't picked up one infection, he'd picked up 2. He'd picked up one called osteomyelitis, which is a bone-eating infection in his spine, but he also caught sepsis. 2 infections that kill you. Obviously, it didn't kill him, but it nearly did. From there, he went straight onto a ward, and he was there for 3 months. They put him on the strongest painkillers you can be on. He was drinking morphine if it was water. He was having OxyContin and Oxynorm, which was a quick-acting and slow-acting morphine. He had fentanyl patches on his arm, which were 10 times stronger than heroin, and he was having shots of ketamine every 3 to 4 hours. All strong opiate drugs that people get addicted to, and he was on these for like 9 months. So you can just imagine what it was like coming off the weaning off of those drugs, because the pain of that was excruciating, probably worse than the injury, but he got through it just. After about 3 weeks, the doctor came in and said, right, Dan, says, we're going to have to do another MRI scan on your spine, see how these antibiotics are doing. He went and had the MRI done, and the doctor came in and went, shook his head at him and says, Dan, he says, your back's a mess. He said, but you're going to have to operate on you again. He said, but I don't know what I'm going to have to do until I open you up in surgery. So whilst he was going down with the anaesthetic, he didn't have a clue what he was going to wake up to. He remembers coming to in the recovery room, seeing the doctor over the other side of the room, and he gave him a shout. He said, Doc, he says, come here. As he was coming across, he crossed his fingers. He said to the doc, said, Doc, please give me some good news. He said, I'm 30 years old. I'm in the peak of my career. I'm playing the best footy I've ever played. He said, but more than that, he said, I've signed a 4-year deal there on the most money. But my wife's at home looking after the kids, and they rely on me to bring the money in. Please, please, give me some good news. The doctor shook his head and said, Dan, he said, I'm sorry. He said, I can't. He said, the damage was that bad, I had to take the full disc out at the L3, L4. He said, but more than that, he said, I had to take away the bottom part of your spine. I had to fuse it together with metal rods, screws, and cage. After he came out of hospital, the next 6 months, he had the nurses come around to give him his antibiotics and the painkillers. But he'd gone from being this full-time professional rugby league player who used to train 3 and 4 times a day to just about being able to do this. In the morning when he woke up, with all his effort, he'd just about make it to his couch. In the evening, with a bit of help from his family and all his effort, he'd just about make it to his bed. He couldn't even help his wife around the house, do the cooking or the cleaning. He couldn't take his son to rugby training. He couldn't take his daughter to dance and practice. All the things that you take for granted and he took for granted, he couldn't do. And then he got a phone call off his new club, Bradford. Instead of them ringing him up to say, hey, Dan, listen, we're going to pay for your physio just so that you get a better quality of life and your doctor's bills, they did none of that. What Bradford rang up to say was that they'd ripped his contract up. So he lost his job, lost his career, and eventually they lost their family home when he had a wife and 2 kids that he was supporting. And that's when he started struggling with depression very, very badly. He'll be brutally honest, he couldn't get the thought of suicide out of his head. Every minute of every hour of every day was how he's going to kill himself. Should I get in a car, wrap it around a tree? Should I take loads of drink and drugs? And it wasn't that he didn't love his wife and kids. He just felt that he was a burden to them. He just thought in his head that if somebody was come in and give his wife a better life than what he could give, somebody would bring his kids up better than what he could. So what did he do? He did everything that every single man on this call would do. He put that mask on, pretending that he was all right. Until 3 weeks down the track, he found himself in a car park in the middle of Wigan, and beside him in the car was a litre bottle of gin and enough pills that had killed everyone on this call, and was going to take his own life. And for some reason, he doesn't know why, he didn't, because he was in a totally different headspace then to what he is now, which is great. So he remembers going home being totally pissed off because he had a plan and now he was lost. He put the drink and the drugs away, got himself back on the couch watching telly. But the biggest thing that he did was that he just opened up that little bit to his 2 brothers about what was going on in his head. His 2 brothers had noticed the difference, went to his mum and dad and told them. Within 3 weeks, his mum, dad, and his wife walked into the front room and they turned the telly off and said to him, listen, Dan, you need to tell us what's going on in your head. We've noticed a massive difference in you. He just thought to himself, you know what, if I don't get this out of my head, then I'm dead. So he thought, right. So he told him everything, told him about his suicidal thoughts, told him how they'd lost everything because of him. Even though his injury wasn't his fault, his wife and kids still lost everything because of him. And him just getting that off his shoulders and out of his head was like a massive weight had gone. So they spent the next couple of hours talking and crying, and his mum said, right, we need to go and see your GP. Went to his GP, and his GP put him on 2 antidepressants, which really helped him over the next 3.5 years. You know, they don't suit everyone, but they helped him. But the biggest thing that he did was he started talking to a counsellor. He went talking to a counsellor in the Sporting Chance Clinic, which was set up by Tony Adams, the ex-Arsenal England captain. And he used to talk to his counsellor twice a week. Then it became once a week, once a fortnight, once every 3 months. And now they just chat as friends on the phone. So if he was to leave you 2 messages today, his first one would be a simple one. If anyone on this call is struggling with low mood, anxiety, stress, depression, please, please, please talk to someone about it. Because he knows for a fact if he didn't talk to his mum, dad, and his wife that day, 100% he wouldn't be here. He'd have ruined his wife's life, his kids' life, his mum and dad, his brothers, and his youngest daughter. She wouldn't have even been born, which he cannot imagine this world without her. But the biggest message that he always likes to leave is a simple one. You don't have to be part of a team. Every single person in your life is part of your team. And if you notice a difference in one of your teammates, might be the guy that's always taking the piss out of you. All of a sudden he stopped doing that. The girl that you normally sat with at lunchtime and now she's isolating herself, eating a meal by herself. The guy or girl who, you know, and you never know, that one question could save a life. And the last thing from Dan is about resilience. You know, you're not born with resilience. You've got to go through a lot of trauma in your life to build that resilience up. You know, he knows that for a fact. So since he had that first back operation, he's had a further 8 operations on his spine. He had 3 shoulder reconstructions. He had his right thumb fused. 3 years after he caught sepsis for the first time, he caught it for the second time when he went in for a clean out on his right knee. In the next year, he ended up having 24 operations on his right leg. After his 9th operation, the surgeon at Wigan Infirmary told him they were going to cut his leg off, but he wouldn't let them. He made them transfer him from Wigan Infirmary down to Chelsea and Westminster Hospital in London by ambulance because he knew a surgeon down there that would save his leg, which he did. And all those things has built up his resilience because, as he said earlier, just a bit over 3 years ago, he was diagnosed with a brain tumour. But it wasn't a problem to him because he personally couldn't do anything about it. He goes by the pretense of controlling the controllables now. He only tends to worry about things that he can do something about. There'll be a lot of people on this call that'll stress and worry about things you can do nothing about. What's the point? What's the point? You can't change it. Control the controllables. It's really, really important for your mental health.
Cheers, Phil. Thank you very
Injuries
much.
play a part in our sport, just like all the ones that Dan got. You squeamish, turn away. Cameron Geraldo there, right? It dislocated and broke his ankle. But I can guarantee what happened to him that night. He was put on a stretcher. He was put into an ambulance where he was taken to hospital where he had his ankle x-rayed. Then he had it operated on where he had a pin inserted and he was put into a pot. And as soon as he walked out of that hospital, he was straight back into rehabilitation at his club, which is a really lonely time for a player when he's over on the sideline by himself, training with the physio while all his mates are over there. It can really impact upon his mental health. But that's a physical injury. And I can guarantee that every single person on this call, if you had a physical injury, you'd go and get it sorted straight away because you want to get back into good health. But surely it makes sense. If you've got a mental health injury, you need to treat that with the same immediacy you do your physical injury. You need to treat your mental health and your physical health exactly the same. Because the reality is, if your mental health is shot, your physical health's not going to be there anyway. So treat them both the same, please.
But people use no worries. People use different things to cope. So I would imagine most people, or not, maybe everyone on this call will drink tea and coffee. Yeah, I would imagine. There may be a few of you that drink Monster, Red Bull, which is the devil.
Yeah,
and why do I say that? Is because one can of Red Bull or Monster takes 9 hours to get out of your system. So if you drink 2, 3, 4 of them in the day, wondering why you're a bit agitated, you can't sleep, that is because of that. And it is really, really dangerous. We did a talk for a company a couple of weeks ago, and there was a guy there who was drinking about 20 cans a day, and he had a massive, massive heart attack. So please, if you're drinking Red Bull, don't bother. Water.
Load of pressure on your heart does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really does.
It does. But the 3 typical things that people do, especially men when they're struggling with their mental health, they will drink alcohol to excess, they will use drugs, and they will fight with people. You know, it's a massive, massive problem. And it, Phil, really, really massive problem.
Because what happens is when you wake up the next day, you know, you're hungover, so you're rough as, got a hole in your pocket with all the money that you spent, and that problem's still there. Sometimes it's 10 times worse. Massive, massive poor coping strategies, and one we need to steer clear of.
Absolutely.
However, we don't speak up. You know, obviously we're aware that suicide's a killer. That is, but the biggest killer is stigma. You know, the fear of being judged, fear of losing your job, losing respect, the embarrassment of it all. You know, we've been delivering this now for 13 and a half years. And it's not just our job to break down that stigma. You know, all you guys on this call have to do that too, because we're trying to normalise the conversation in and around mental health, where you can say to your mate after a weekend, hey, Dan, how was your mental health over the weekend? And him have a normal conversation with you. But we're not there yet. And the reason we're not there is because of that macho culture. Excuse me. I was brought up in the bush in Australia. And I can remember at 14 when I was rounding up some cattle with my dad. He just said, you know, son, He said, when you get old, you've got your housewife and kids. He said, you're the rock for them. You can't show emotion. You can't show weakness and you can't cry. Well, he got 99% right. He got that 1% completely wrong. You know, me and Dan got taught from a young age as sportsmen to show weakness on a rugby field, you become a target. But people are taking that analogy off the sports field, are taking it out into everyday life, and that's when tragedies are happening. You've got to be able to admit you've got a weakness. Once you can admit it, you can do something about it. But we have that need to earn money, and we're reluctant to seek help. We bottle up our feelings. We have that shame of failure, and then we go on to use the negative coping strategies that Dan spoke about before. Dan?
Yeah, so promoting mental fitness in people, you know, if you look at the third one down, you know, eating well, obviously massive for your physical health, but it's massive for your mental health as well. Because if you eat McDonald's every day, you feel shit, it has a massive impact on your mental health. Keeping active, exercise is a massive, massive antidepressant. When I did my first, it was one of my last shoulder surgeries, and I'd finished playing. You know, I couldn't run for 6 years, which is really tough for me because I used to love training, used to love weights. But luckily, after 6 years, I ended up doing the London Half Marathon, and I absolutely loved it because I really worked hard mentally and physically. Sleeping well is important. It's where your body and brain does all its repairing. And I can guarantee that every single one of you on this call here, well, Phil will tell you the things that you're good at and the things that you enjoy. But another one from me is that music. Music raises serotonin and dopamine levels in your brain. So if you like music, keep listening to it.
Happy hormones.
Yeah, gives you happy hormones. It's unbelievable. I'm going to pass you on to Mr. Phil Vivas.
Thanks, mate. I'll give you an insight to me, guys, and we'll wrap up. I came over from Australia in '84, and I came across here just to get 12 months experience playing rugby league in the UK. I've been there 40 years, so I didn't really work at it. But I went to St. Helens, where I was there for 12 and a half years, ended up playing 381 games for them. Whilst I was there, bought a house, got married, had a couple of kids. And then after that 12 and a half years, they decided to put me on the transfer list. Unfortunately for me, at the same time, so did the wife. So I went through a bit of a messy divorce, and back then, nobody could tell me how to deal with it. I had the answers to everything back then, and my answer to that was simple. I just went and got on the drink. I then got smashed, woke up the next day, hungover, needed to get rid of that, so I ended up straight back in the pub. And it became a bit of a vicious circle because it was every day and every night till about 4 weeks down the track when something just clicked inside my head to say, you know, you need to sort yourself out. You got a mortgage and a couple of kids. So I did, and I went across to Huddersfield where I was playing over there. 97, I ended up a captain them into the top division, the Super League. And then in 98, I was asked to go on the coaching staff, which I hadn't really thought about, to be fair. I thought, you know what, I'll just move back to Australia. I thought about it for a week, and I thought, well, I really haven't got anything else to fall back on, so I'll give it a shot. So I signed up as the assistant player coach. Halfway through the following that year, I was told to retire, take up the head coach's role because they'd sacked the coach. Over the next couple of years, I went back into the assistant's role until 2000 when they gave the job to another Aussie called Tony Smith. Now, he'd arrived 4 weeks before the end of the year, and we had a meeting and we discussed my role on his coaching staff, which was to be his assistant coach for the next 2 years. We got to the last game of the season on a Friday night. It was at Halifax, and he just walked into the change room at the end of the game, just said to everyone, you all need to come and see me on Monday morning, and we'll do an appraisal of how you've performed. So I didn't think much over the weekend. Walked into his office on the Monday morning, and he just hit me with a finger and said, you need to go and find a job because I found someone for yours. When you realise you should sign the contract fast. But fortunately for me, one of my ex-players was delivering NVQs in sport. So I started doing that, which led me back to coaching because I was delivering it to the juniors over at the Bradford Bulls. And the coach at the time was a guy called Brian Noble. And Nobby just popped out one day and just said to me, Phil, do you want to be my assistant? So 2 minutes later, I'd binned off 3 jobs and I was back where I wanted to be, in amongst the boys, having the banter, the crack, everything that I'd known for the last 18, 19 years. So over the next 3.5 years, life couldn't get much better, really. We won 2 grand finals at Old Trafford. We won the Challenge Cup down at the Millennium Stadium. And then we became the best team in the world by winning the World Club Challenge twice, to the point where we both got headhunted to go to Wigan. So I did another 3.5 years over there as Nobby's assistant. And then I got called into the owner's office. He just said, listen, Phil, he said, Nobby's contract's expired. We're not renewing his contract. So therefore, we're not going to renew yours either. We're going in a different direction. Now, I don't know whether I was a little bit older or whether because I just remarried, had 2 very, very young children. But it was the first time that I dipped my toe into depression. But back then, I couldn't even tell you that was depression because I didn't know what it was. I just knew that this feeling was the worst I'd ever experienced in my life. If I was to explain how it was to me, as if I was walking around all day being strangled, and I found it tough to breathe. I'd go to bed with it at night, and I'd wake up with it the next day. And I had this for 9 months. You know, hindsight's a great thing. I should have got it sorted straight from the off, but how you're supposed to sort something out, you don't even know what it is either. And then it disappeared, and I couldn't understand that either. And I went back coaching at Salford, where I became the head coach there. In 2012, we had a pretty good year. Probably punched above our weight with the players I had, but we went okay. And then we went into pre-season for the 2013 season. And I was called into the owner's office again. And he just said, listen, Phil, he said, I've run out of money. He said, if I don't find a buyer for the club, he said, we're all going into administration. We're all out of work. Then we weren't being paid for 3 months leading into Christmas properly on time. So I had a lot of stressed out players, getting a lot of grief from home, a lot of grief from the bank. And all I could say to them is, don't worry, everything will be okay. And it was. Because a millionaire came in and bought the club, a guy called Marwan Kukash. We had a meeting and I signed a 2-year deal to be his head coach. Went into a press conference. He said, really looking forward to working with Phil over the next 2 years. And 4 games later, he sacked me, having won 1, lost 3. And I couldn't get my head around it for a few reasons. 1, because of the success that I had the year before. 2, how hard I'd worked to have a side so we had one to play with. And 3, he just didn't give me a chance. And I fell heavily back into a depression. Now, this had nothing to do with money because he had to pay my contract up. Financially, I was secure for the next 6 years whilst I was looking for a job. This was all about me letting me 4 kids down. I couldn't look one of my kids in the eye if I felt like I'd failed them. And I just started isolating myself away in the bedroom. Just wouldn't come out. In fact, I only left the house twice whilst I was going through all this. And that was just to walk into the local village where a couple of my mates were and I crack a couple of jokes. And as I turned to go home, you'd hear him say, he's in a good place, eh? But I wasn't. I just wanted to go home and lock the door. Internally, I was dying. But the depression just kicked in harder and harder. Till one morning I woke up, I walked downstairs, I sat on the couch, I went, I'm done. So I started planning on where I went and how I was going to kill myself. And I couldn't get the thoughts out of my head. The more that I tried to get them out of my head, the more intensified they became. I had these thoughts for 2 months. And then my sister rang me from Australia. And she rang up to tell me that my nephew had killed himself, which absolutely destroyed me then, and it still does to this day because we were quite close. And we used to speak regular. And I'll tell you a tale about Dave. It really correlates with my life when I was growing up. When I was growing up, everyone used to think I was a waste of space. I was never going to achieve anything in life. I was just going to be that eternal loser. And they used to think the same about Dave. And I said, mate, I said, don't worry about that. I said, everyone used to think the same about me. You'll find something you're good at. Once you get hold of it, just run with it. And he was one for harebrained schemes, I must admit. And he just said, I tell you what, he said, what about if I become your manager? I get you a coaching job over here in Australia. I said, how will everyone think of me then? Oh, yeah, they'll love you. And I hung up on him. I thought, here we go again. This time around, he enrolled in university on a sports management course. In his first year, he failed every exam. He didn't tell anyone. He just decided to take a year out. So he moved from Brisbane down to the Gold Coast with his girlfriend. Got himself a job as a landscape gardener. And at 5 o'clock one morning, his boss rang him up and just said, listen, Dave, there's no work today. It's raining. And 35 minutes later, he was dead. He walked out the back of that house and he killed himself. And that's the thing with suicide. It don't go away. It's there for life. The only thing that happens, you learn to cope a little bit better on a day-to-day basis. And the reality is that it's a permanent solution to a part-time problem. But on the other end of the phone, I've got my sister who's blaming herself for his death. And all I can say to her is the only person I know isn't here to tell you it's not your fault. So I said, right, I'll ring you every day until you tell me different. So I rang her every day for 6 months until she said, give me a break. But for 6 months, I never had a suicidal thought because I had a focus, I had a purpose, I was looking after her. But as soon as I stopped talking to her, everything flooded back into my head. And I just took off through the front door. And I couldn't even tell you what I was going to do. And then my phone rang, and it was my wife. She said, where are you? And I looked around, I was 20 miles away. She said, I'll come and pick you up. I said, don't worry, I'll walk back. It took me a day. And every day over the next 4 weeks, I just kept going out in a different direction. After 4 weeks, I got to my front door and I just said, listen, if I don't get this shit out of me head, I'm dead. So I just walked to the kitchen table and just wrote 3 small things that I wanted to achieve in the next hour. And they weren't much. It was to wash the dishes, it was clean the front room, mow the back garden. So I went and did them and never had a suicidal thought. So I thought, right, I'm going back to that table, right, what I'll do in the next hour. Then it was a day, then it was a week, and so on and so forth. Yeah, if you've seen my diary back then, you would never been able to make head nor tail if there was that much rubbish written in it. It's a little bit more streamlined now. I write 4 specific goals for myself every day. My number 1 goal of the day never ever changes. It's one that I can do at home or in a hotel. And it's a simple one. As soon as I get up, I make my bed. So every morning I get up, I make my bed. And now, if I don't achieve the other 3 in the day, it really doesn't faze me anymore because I know I'm successful. I've made my bed. I'm bloody good at it too. And people say to me, why do you go around the country talking about your private life, getting emotional about your nephew? It's very, very simple, really. I'm very, very passionate about mental health. 1, because I've lived that journey. I don't want people to go through what I went through. And 2, because I'm from a family that's lost someone to mental illness. And if by me being in front of people and saying how goals really impacted upon my recovery, how they'll impact the rest of my life. But the biggest thing that saved my life was offloading my shit. It was talking to my sister, my father-in-law, my brother-in-law, my wife. Because if I didn't, I'd just be another statistic. Simple as. So the simple message that I leave everyone is this. You got anything swimming around in your head, no matter how small or how big, offload it to someone. Because offloading really does save lives. So cheers.
Great work,
Dad.
Phil. Thanks a lot, mate. What can you do to help yourself? 10 little steps here. Do simple things that you enjoy every day. Getting active. Exercise was my biggest one when I was struggling. I got back into boxing and I love boxing. It really does make me feel good. Learn something new. These 3 are the most important. Talk about how you feel. Ask for help if you need it. And keep in contact with your mates. Helping others. Me and Phil do a lot of work for charity for 2 reasons. We love helping people less fortunate than us, but we do it for a selfish reason as well. Try to pick one positive moment from every day, but just accept who you are. Phil will tell you about that one, and I'll tell you about the one. Go on,
so when you look into the mirror, you go to the toilet today at some stage and you look in the mirror and you've got a reflection coming back at you. There's only one of you in the world. One. Just be the best version of you. Don't try and be the girl down the road or the bloke round the corner. You'll do a shit impersonation of them. Just be you and the best possible version of you.
Yeah, and don't forget to take a break when that pressure builds. You've got to know where to seek help throughout your business, whether it's your hockey health, your human resource department, or you have employee assistance programs, which most companies do now. People are scared of using that, but it is all where no one else will find out about it.
It's all right for people.
Yeah.
Your employee assistant, people are scared to use it because they don't think it's confidential. They think that whatever you speak to them about, it's going to go back to your bosses. But the only thing that goes back to your bosses is how many people's used it, not who's used it or what for. And it is for a lot of different things. It can be mental health. It can be for gambling. It can be for money problems, drug misuse. And there's free counselling sessions in there as well. So really important to know what it is and where you can find it and how to use it.
Absolutely. Cheers, Phil. Your company will have mental health first aiders, I would imagine. Anybody tell me yes?
Hi, Danny. Yeah, that's correct.
Yay! And I bet there's a few on here as well. Well, we're lucky, us two, we deliver mental health first aid training for anyone. So if you want any more, we're the people.
And the thing with them is they're the right people for the job because they're there for 3 reasons. They're there to listen non-judgmentally. They're there to look for signs and symptoms in people. And they're there to signpost where they can seek some help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Your line manager is someone you can speak to, but we've all got a trusted work colleague and a friend. And please remember, if you are struggling with your mental health, you are not on your own. Now, in the UK, nearly 1 in 3 people struggle with their mental health. So I just said there's 60 people on here now, 20 could be struggling. It's awful. I've been there, struggled really, really a lot of times. but let's find someone who you need to speak to and let's talk. It's one of the bravest things you can do, but the best.
Yep.
And that's
So in
about
summary,
it,
we've
guys.
looked at your well-being.
Yeah.
Consider the importance of having a healthy mind to help you perform better. We looked at drinking drugs, how you'd help a mate. Mantra at the bottom is if you feel good, you're going to perform better and live well.
And what we know is that when people are able to talk about rough times, do things to make themselves feel good, results in life can be so different. So from me and Phil, just like to thank you, Katie, for inviting us. I'd like to wish you all the best in the future. But if you've got some questions now, please do ask. Please ask, because that's what we're here for.
Yeah, we've got 5 minutes left of the call. If anyone wants to drop any questions in the chat, but also I think we've got quite a close-knit group here. If anyone wants to just unmic themselves and ask any questions, feel free to.
So just while we're waiting for somebody to be brave and put their hand up as the first person, thanks, Danny. Thanks, Phil. That's been really inspirational, very personal. Thank you for sharing your stories. You've given us loads of things to look out for in ourselves and each other, and lots of things that we can do to help ourselves. I'm sure that there was a lot in there that we could all relate to. Just to say, we do have mental health first aiders in McCann's. So for anybody that doesn't know, next time you go to make a cup of tea, have a look on the wall. On the notice board will be the photographs of the mental health first aiders, just in case you don't know anybody's name. They're all there with telephone numbers. We do have an employee assistance program as well. So if you're stuck, if there's anything you want to talk to, obviously your line manager is always there. The mental health first aiders are always there, but don't be afraid to pick up the phone and just talk to, or just wander down the corridor and talk to someone that looks like a friendly face. I think it's fair to say that we can all relate to this, so we're all here for each other.
Yeah, brilliant.
Spot on.
So has somebody put their hand up in the time it's taken me to?
We've had someone ask, can I have a quick recap on the breathing technique? And
Yep.
and then there's a few thank yous, but we'll get to that.
Okay, it's 4, 5, 6. So you've been through your nose for 4 seconds. You hold it at the back for 5, then you exhale for 6. The problem people get is that they'll probably get to 5 or 6 and they give up. But you need to practice and practice and practice to get yourself up to about 18, 19. Once you got up around that area, anytime you got a bit of anxiety, a bit of stress, and all the butterflies, the tightening of the chest, you use those breathing techniques. It'll just relax you, slows everything down. I use it now when I'm walking the dog. I get a bit of anxiety about dogs are fighting. So people see me walking up and down the heath doing my breathing exercise. They look at me and think, "Oh, look at that weirdo." Really, I'm just trying to help myself with the anxiety. So it does work.
Yeah.
It's really, really, really good. Really good.
And we also have a hand up from Helen. Over to you, Helen.
Yeah, thanks, guys. That was really, really powerful. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. And I'm maybe going to selfishly use this as a bit of a plug. So in Farran's, we do have mental health first aiders, and we're really grateful to have them. However, we've also put out a message at the minute. Lisa is asking for additional volunteers. So if there's anybody on the call who feels that it's something that they would like to contribute towards, now is your chance. Drop Lisa a wee note, because we'll be scheduling the training for that as well. So thank you.
Well, more is better.
And I think the rest of it is just a few thank yous from everyone on the call. I want to thank as well the partners from Farran's and Colas joining Team McCann on this webinar for our Listen and Learn event today. And of course, thank you very much, Danny and Phil, absolute superstars. And following this call, we will be sending out an email with resources. We'll also beg, borrow and steal Phil's breathing technique and put that in the resources as well, so you can have a recap on that. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All the best,
Thank
everyone. Take care.
Yeah, see you later, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye now.
Thanks,
Thanks
all.
very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Cheers, mate. Ta.
Cheers, Phil. No worries, Kev.